Welcome to the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast, a podcast featuring interviews with equestrian authors who love all things horses and writing about them. In each episode, you'll hear inspirational stories from horsebook authors, including writing advice and marketing tips to help you write your very own horsebook. If you're an author, aspire to be an author, or simply love horsebooks, then you are in the right place. I'm your host, Kade, and creative writing makes my spurs jingle. Welcome to the Equestrian Author Spotlight Show. I am so excited today to have fellow author Susan Conley on the show. Hi, Susan.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, great to have you here today. So before we get into the fun part, which is the interview questions, I'm going to read your bio just to give listeners a little bit of your background, and then we'll hop into the interview. Okay. Resident in Ireland for 21 years, Susan E. Conley went horse crazy at the tender age of 41 and 11/12. In 2006, she finally got up the nerve to get up on an actual horse as opposed to reading and dreaming about them. And it's been harder and easier than anything she's ever done yet. Susan is a graduate of Pratt Institute with a BFA in communication design. She has worked in the field since the summer between sophomore and junior year and counts The Village Voice, New York Magazine, and Entertainment Weekly as past design experiences. She has a Master of Philosophy in Irish Theatre Studies from the Manuel Beckett Center, Trinity College, an honors degree in psychology, and a diploma in equine assistant therapy and learning. She worked as a journalist soon after moving to Ireland, as theater critic, and as a feature writer on lifestyle topics. Susan is the author of 3 other books: Drama Queen, The Fidelity Project, and the soon-to-be-released That Magic Mischief. She is at work on her next horse book, yay, as well as a new paranormal historical romance series. Susan was not born in the saddle and didn't even get near one until she reached middle age. It never even occurred to her as a child to pine for a horse. She doesn't run a yard, compete at a high level, or even own her own horse yet. After 14 years, though, she's still in love with everything horsey and a member of her yard's riding club. She stands as safety officer and is hoping to compete off-yard in 2021. Susan, that is a phenomenal biography. There is so much going on there, and I'm so excited to have you on the show and dive a little deeper into your background and how you got into horses. And so this leads us right into the first question. How did you begin your love affair with horses at the tender age of 41 and 11/12?
Yeah. It was in reaction to having left my marriage to a substance misuser. I guess I had been so used to, trying to control something much bigger than myself that I decided that riding a horse would be a good idea. I had had one experience prior to that, which ended really badly and with a sore bum. And I just put it off. And then when I did finally leave, I was like, well, I guess I need something to do now, And I thought I'd go for maybe, I know that I only booked in like 3 lessons. And even at that stage, it felt really optimistic, like 3 whole lessons, like 3 weeks in a row. I was going to show up and do this thing that I'd never done before. And at the end of the first lesson, which I participated in only in walk, I got down and I was like, this is the best thing I've ever done for myself in my life. Like, it was instantaneous.
Oh, that's wonderful. And horses. So have you always loved horses? Like what led you to be like, I'm going to book these 3 lessons and start riding? I mean, I know, and heal actually with these horses. Like what just prompted you to do that? Because there's so many other things you could have done, right? You could have decided to be a race car driver or, fly airplanes or, like why horses?
I don't know, really, because I'd never even read Black Beauty until I started reading all the books about horses when I started riding them. They weren't in my landscape by any stretch, like there were probably a couple of people in high school who did ride horses, but those were like the rich kids. So it was completely beyond my remit. There was no way in the world I was ever going to even consider dreaming about it. And I mean, I'd always been pretty sporty as a child, like playing basketball and riding my bike, and I was swimming and everything else, and, you know, used to go to the gym. So when I had to come up with something to do, or when it became clear to me that it would be a really good thing to have something to occupy my time, I was like, oh, geez, you know, I'll just do this. And Ireland obviously is huge horse country, so it wasn't difficult to find a place to go.
And that, I mean, that's amazing. It's almost like horses like magically showed up for you at the right time in your life. And we'll get a little bit into this because you talk about this in your recent horse book that covers some very personal and important topics to talk about. So before we move on a little bit, I wanted to talk about, is there any advice you would give to someone who wants to start riding horses midlife? Because I think there's a lot of horse lovers in that didn't grow up riding horses that would still like to give it a try. And you're a testament to it, to it's possible. And you're sitting in your office there, and you've got all these rows of beautiful ribbons behind you. For people that are watching us on YouTube, she's got a whole line of proudly displayed ribbons behind her. So obviously you're very successful at it. And it's, you know, what would you say to someone that wants to get into riding midlife? I mean, you did it.
Yeah, just do it. I kind of jumped in with lessons. If you have any sort of like, I don't know, worries about your own physical fitness, you might want to start with private lessons to begin. But once a week, you know, it's 1 hour. Just show up. You're not going to be put on some kind of crazy thing that you can't handle. And in fact, you're probably going to be put on a poor old schoolie who's been there forever and, you know, is bomb proof. So you can probably, I'd say you can count on that happening, you know, 90% of the time. I've never regretted it. I never regretted it, even through all the years of injuries and falling off and all the money spent. It's the best thing I've ever done. So just try.
Oh, that's great advice. And yes, I think you're right to mention that a lot of places where you can go and take lessons, they have safe horses that they put, you know, little small mini big people on, like children.
Yeah, exactly.
and they'll give you a horse that's safe and appropriate for your level of riding. And was there anything that surprised you about riding a horse for the first time at that age? Like, were you surprised at how sore maybe your legs got, or were you surprised at how you felt, or that, you know, was there anything that kind of surprised you?
Well, I'll tell you something. When I got off the first one and I was walking down the hill to the bus, I totally understood why cowboys walk that way, that kind of bow-legged, hip shot stride. Because I mean, and you know, I literally thought I was going to die when I got up on it, but then I survived, and then I got off and I thought I was going to die some more, just because it was brutal. But it was so fantastic. I'd never been prouder of myself in my life. Like, it was so great. So there's a lot of that, you know, it's like anything else. You have ambitions and you want to do stuff, and sometimes, you know, you have a good lesson, you have a bad lesson. But I've consistently shown up for this. I've never done anything for 14 years, and at the very least twice a week. And I go every single week, and it just builds up all kinds of confidence that serves me really well off the horse. And I think too, for me, the biggest thing that I get out of it is just everything falls away. The minute you walk onto the yard, even before we even drive through the gate, you know, everything's gone. And all you care about is the horse you're going to ride, and, you know, changing into your boots and chatting with your friends and getting your lesson in. Nothing that happens on the other side of that fence matters the minute you get there. And it's such a gift.
Oh, that is exactly right. And such a special feeling that I think only equestrians can truly understand, is that feeling of the world just melting away and totally being in the moment and being around these magical animals, and building the confidence and building the relationships with them. And then also your friends that you meet through horseback riding. And you just summed it up perfectly. And I loved your analogy about now understanding why cowboys walk the way that they do. Because literally your first few times, it feels like you're riding a barrel, you know. And
oh my God. And I wasn't breathing properly. And like, I had my hands so stiff because my whole body was just like, I was bracing myself. I was
Mm-hmm.
bracing myself to get like chucked into the wall or something. So there was a lot of that muscle stuff going on the next day as well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was just, oh man, I'm so grateful to remember it so vividly. It's still such an abiding, spectacular memory.
Oh, then thank you for sharing that experience with us. That's so special and so meaningful. And so I wanted to ask you, you have a diploma in equine assisted therapy and learning. So, what made you decide to pursue this education? I imagine it's after you started your writing adventures, or maybe it happened before. I'm curious about that. And then tell us about the power of healing with our furry friends. Like I'm really excited about learning more about what equine assisted therapy and learning is like for you.
Great. Yeah. I finished that in 2016, I think. So it kind of fell, after I'd had about 10 years experience with the horses, and also when I was finishing writing the book. And I just decided that I really would like to be able to provide a way for people to have access to horses, whether or not they want to ride them, and probably most likely not riding them. Most of the work and the exercises and the lessons that I learned in the diploma has to do with working with them on the ground. And it's kind of amazing how much somebody can get out of just trying to put a head collar on a horse,
Mm-hmm.
because you've got this live, enormous sentient being and you have this thing in your hand, and some of them just don't want it. So to have that be the exercise, to just have someone who's unfamiliar with the horse be able to execute an action like that, and then in turn be given a lead rope and asked to walk the horse around. It's really kind of amazing how simple it is, but how effective it is. It's confidence building, it's learning something new, it's being around this animal that you've never been around before in your life and may not have had access to at all. Even the simplest things when you're around a horse are just spectacular and can be so helpful and so healing.
And you mentioned, the difficulty, or like what a lesson could be, just having someone put on for us over here. It's a halter. For you over there, it's a head collar. No, that's
right.
great. I mean, there's different terminologies for things, which is really neat. I just wanted to clarify that. But so in my understanding, I mean, you have a background also in psychology, which was mentioned in your bio. So it's like, I imagine just that exercise for someone that's dealing with something or going through something, it brings up like a lot of what they're dealing with in their real life. Like, I often think that the horse gives you what you need to learn. Like, so for, someone could like be really angry that this horse won't let him put the halter on it, or someone can be really fearful and be like, I can't do it, it's so big. So it kind of, the horse actually brings up, I would imagine, things that people need to deal with. Is that do you agree with that? Or
That's brilliant. Yeah, that's really, really well said. One of the first things anybody ever said to me when I was talking to them about was like, I've been riding these horses and it's kind of weird, but I feel like it's more than just exercise. Like, I feel like emotionally I'm getting better and psychologically I'm improving. And she said that horses are, like biofeedback machines, and they only give you back what you give to them. So like that, if someone's afraid, the horse is going to react based on their state of being. And it's interesting too, I think, because they're in herds, because they are herd animals and they are constantly calibrating to keep a homeostasis. And I think that really comes through when you're working with horses and working with people who have emotional difficulties, because the horse is always scanning the mood. The horse is always aware of their, environment, and they're always doing whatever they can to adjust it and make it better.
That makes a lot of sense. And then, so do you regularly give sessions? Is that something you're doing, or was that like research that you did for your book to add to your book?
Yeah, it was part of that. I mean, I don't have any horses, so it makes it a little bit difficult to offer that right now, but I've been trying to work on, amongst the many other things that I'm trying to do these days, I'd really like to be able to deliver some kind of day-long workshop to start, and the thing is that when we were working in the lesson, in the diploma, and it's quite common, and it's become common parlance that there's, horses are so effective with people who have autism, people who have different kinds of, like attention disorders and things like that. I'm really interested in the people who are the support for people who have those conditions, if that's clear, like the moms who never get the time to themselves, or the siblings who are maybe not forefront in the family because of somebody else's condition having to be made manageable. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, I love that, because we often focus, I mean, I can only imagine it, dealing with that in a family, there's so much focus on the person with the difficult health situation that the other members of the family kind of fall into the back burner. So I think that is a beautiful idea, offering a session to support the mothers and the fathers and the siblings. I think that's amazing. That could be a whole nother book. I think that is just beautiful.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, no, I really, and it doesn't have to be like, I just want to start small and just see how we get on. But I really just because I was basically doing that course for myself, showing up every week for a lesson. I was giving myself the time, and it took a lot of time. I was living across the bay, across Dublin Bay from where I was going horse riding, and it would take me basically on a Saturday. I'd leave the house at about 10:30, and I wouldn't get home till 5:30.
Wow!
Using public transport to get to. Yeah. And it was great at the time because I was just, I was coping with being on my own again, and I was happy enough to wait for a bus. You know what I mean?
And I
sort of like, get
and
out and about.
And you talk about this a lot in your book. I loved your book. I read your book, and I really want to. I think this is a perfect opportunity to open the gates and have you share with us about your book, because I think we really built up to. This is a perfect moment. And in the, what you share in the personal story and the healing, I was so moved when I read your book, and I'm so excited to have you on the show to talk about this, because I think this is an important topic. So tell us about your book and a little bit about what brought you, to put this book baby into the world.
Great, thanks. Well, it's my horsey divorcey memoir, as someone called it, it's a little bit jokier than it actually is, but there is some humor in it, which is really nice. Mm-hmm. I started horse riding in 2006, and as a writer, I'm constantly looking for material, and I'm always writing stuff down, and I'm always trying to translate my experience. But for the entire year, I didn't write a single thing about it. I just did it. It was such a different approach to life for me, really. And then 2007, I was like, well, maybe I'll start a blog because somebody might find this interesting. I just turned 42 when I started. And so, some of these stories are pretty funny, and some of them are kind of interesting. And I'm reading a lot about how horses can read your mind and, all this other stuff. So I started writing, posting on the blog, and I thought, well, if I keep doing this, then maybe I can get a book out of it. So 2 years after that, I wrote a proposal because I thought, well, I'll just cobble a bunch of these posts together, and I'm sure there's enough here for a book, which was not a great approach, I'll have to say. Cobbling together is not a great approach if you want to get published. The original plan was to make it a jokey sort of thrills and spills, middle-aged divorcee meets horse kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I had started sort of looking for a horse because everybody was telling me I should get one, because at that stage I was riding 4 days a week. And I started writing it, and I wrote the proposal, and I sent it out, and no one was interested, and I was looking at it again, and I swear to God, I was just sitting here at the desk, and it was like an inner voice said, you have to tell the truth.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I don't want to.
Mhm.
Thanks for nothing. Not interested in this idea. But I wrote it down and I was like, of course you have to. And I had this really lengthy kind of argument with myself. The reason that I took up horse riding was because I had been married to somebody who abused substances, and I left and I started riding horses. That's what the story was, you know, and you know, there's some funny bits in it, as I said before, but I had to tell the truth.
Mhm.
It was ridiculous to even conceive of starting a book of this nature without saying why I had done it in the first place. So that's how that ended up being that way.
And I love that. Hold up the cover of the book for us and tell us the title.
Oh,
Another author taught me that, to always have
so
your book,
smart.
always have your book on hand when you're at events, because you never know when a picture is going to be taken, and always have your book on hand when you're doing an interview, because you never know when you're going to have an opportunity to pop it up there and show the cover. Because this is so important.
Many Brave Fools, a story of addiction, dysfunction, codependency, and horses.
And I really love this memoir, and I love that a voice inside of you is telling you to tell the truth. And I can only imagine that sharing this story, not only working with the horses, but then writing the story about it, really was part of your healing process. But then you've created this beautiful thing that you're sharing with others who may be going through something similar and looking for their own way to heal, who you can help them heal too. I mean, that's got to make you feel, how does that make you feel to have put all this out there?
Yeah, you know, it's a funny thing, because I think I wrote that first proposal in 2009. So it's been a 10-year process. And it's certainly kind of had its ups and downs, obviously, as you would know yourself as an author. And I think at the end of the day, I just want people to be able to see themselves in it somehow and not feel ashamed.
Mm-hmm.
Because shame is a huge, huge element in the codependency lifestyle. And isolation, it just thrives in isolation. So to be able to maybe pick it up and have a look and go, okay, there are some key elements that resonate with me. That would be amazing. I would really be happy for that to happen.
Well, that certainly happened for me when I read your book. I did identify, and I saw myself in a lot of the bits that you shared, and I just was so moved. And I wanted to say, you know, you in the memoir, Many Brave Fools, you give us a glimpse into the chaos of your marriage to someone who is addicted to a substance, and you also detail your growing understanding of your own struggle with codependency. Can you share with listeners, you know, what exactly is codependency, and how did you first realize it's a word that plays a role in your life? Like, codependency is a big topic in this book.
Yeah. And I resisted it like crazy. Like the last thing I wanted to be was to like hang a label on myself as a codependent, because it just was just, I don't know, kind of jargony and, you know, a bit of a hook maybe or something. And I didn't really, and that was another part of it. That was another thing, the same as like, you know, figuring out that I had to tell the truth. I really had to just cop on to myself and go, okay, this is the label that identifies the symptoms and the way that I've been living. Melody Beattie is sort of like the cornerstone author of the codependency literature. And her book, Codependent No More, was a huge influence on me and on the work as well, on this book as well. And just paraphrasing her definition of it, which I think is one of the best I've heard, it's that a codependent is someone who sacrifices their own emotional, physical, mental, and spiritual well-being in an effort to make life better for somebody else. People pleasing is probably a really good way to sort of shorten that even further. Just that everything that I did was done to manage the atmosphere so that somebody else could feel better about themselves. In this case, it was my ex-husband.
Yeah, and that is Thank you for sharing that definition and sharing a little bit about that personal adventure because, or adventure experience. I just, you know, I think we all have elements of codependency in us. And I think particularly women, you know, we try to take care of everything and control everything and make it right. And just, sharing that story can help people like see, oh my gosh, I've been exhibiting, you know, putting everything first before taking care of myself. I just love the book so much. And, you know, I really saw reflections of that for me. And I couldn't thank you more for sharing your personal story. And you mentioned earlier when we were talking about starting the book to not take blogs and try and cobble them together. So I wanted to talk a little bit about because I'm a fiction writer, so I don't know a whole lot about the process of writing a memoir, particularly something so personal that you're reflecting a light on. You know, so once you realized you couldn't cobble your blog post together, how did you go about the process of writing your memoir? Like, how did you get started, and what were the things that your processes as you put this together?
Well, writing nonfiction, you have to write a proposal, okay? And everybody told me this, the internet said so. I talked to actual people who had written actual proposals and couldn't get a good fix on how many pages it had to be. It's just like, and I hated it. It felt like school or something, you know, it felt like a book report. But at the end of the day, it was a really good thing because I didn't know what I was doing. I knew where I wanted to start, obviously, and I knew where I wanted to finish. And I wasn't sure how I was going to get anywhere. So the proposal at least helped me focus my mind a bit. I knew that I wanted it to be 8 chapters. I knew that I wanted each chapter to have a single word as a title, because one of the other things that I love about horse people and horse riding is that just like there's no excess verbiage. It's just like heels down, elbows in, you know, sit back.
Chin up.
Just get yeah, exactly. Look in front of you. It's just so direct and it's so simple and straightforward. So I knew I wanted to do that. And then I just started pulling out, well, I mean, you know, speaking of cobbling, I did have a whole bunch of posts that I realized were not just about sort of like the day-to-day funny stuff that was happening, but had some more emotional heft to them. So I started arranging those in sort of a thematic way. And then I just started writing it. Piece by piece, treating each chapter like it was its own discrete essay, but then obviously they all link together in the end. I don't know. I mean, I started writing it based on that first idea that I had. I did about 3 chapters, and then that's when I realized that I had to tell the truth. So when I started over, I had kind of a little bit of a better idea of the concepts that I wanted to bring in. And then I didn't even know really when I started that I was going to start writing about 12-step, which became a huge part of the book as well, because the last thing I ever wanted to do was walk into a 12-step room. And that was another great thing that when I walked out of there, I was like, okay, after my first meeting, I was like, yep, this is where I need to be.
And you learned the 12-step program from, I would imagine, Al-Anon? Would it be Al-Anon there? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's for people who have someone like an alcoholic or someone that's addicted to drugs in their life. They're not the ones that are addicted. So AA is for those who have the problem, the challenge with addiction, and then Al-Anon is for those that have a spouse or a friend or a family member who has a problem with addiction.
That's it. Exactly.
Yeah, just wanted to clarify that. And, you know, and so you've mentioned, like, you were like, I don't want to, the voice was telling you to tell you the truth, but you're like, oh, I don't want to do this. I don't want to share this. So, you know, how did you get over those hurdles, you know, when you were, when you were personally facing these things, when you were writing so openly about your life, like, how did you push through that? Because you do share some very personal details about what you went through in your marriage.
Yeah, they don't, it feels, you know, perfectly in the right place in the past to be able to write about it without the emotion getting involved, and still be able to write about it freshly, I think. There were things that you don't forget, the way that they transpired. So it's easy to write it effectively. But I am in, and have been, and during the writing was in control of that aspect of it. And being able to control it in a way, to make it information, really helped me distance myself a bit from it. And it also allowed me to be, paradoxically more honest about it, because I wasn't emotionally triggered anymore. And it was easier for me to just really, again, just be as honest as possible.
That's really fantastic. And you talk about this a little bit in the book, but you're originally from New York City, but you now live in Ireland, and this is part of the book. Tell us how you ended up living in Ireland. Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. My dad was second generation. His mom was from County Limerick, which is on the opposite side of the coast. I live in the Dublin area right now. And I was very randomly taking an acting class, and my scene partner at the time said, "Oh, you're Irish." And I was like, "Well, I have Irish people in my background, I guess. I don't know. I don't think about it very much." He's like, "Oh, you should see if you could get a passport." And I'm like, "What are you even talking about?" And he said, "No, you can do it." And this is really I don't even know how I found this out, because this was 1994. So we're talking like basic internet. And I don't even think the Irish Embassy in New York had a website. Oh my God, I might have rung them. I mean, that's crazy.
Oh man, things have really changed, haven't they? Oh my goodness.
So analog. Oh my gosh. So I was like, okay, well, I don't know. And so I got all these papers, and wrote them a check, and I got a passport. I got a birth certificate. I got a foreign birth certificate. And then I got a passport, and I was like, well, what am I going to do with this now? And I hadn't even been to Ireland. at that stage. I think I got my passport officially in like 1995. No, that can't be true. Well, anyway, no, I don't remember. Anyway, so I went over on a holiday, and like we wouldn't have been like mad into being Irish growing up. So when I got here, I had absolutely no idea what to expect. And I had the best 3 weeks I've ever had in my life. I just had such a good time, and I felt so comfortable here. I was traveling on my own. I met people everywhere I went. And I was in tears on the plane on the way back. And I was like, okay, well, what are we going to do about this? And I was, again, rudimentary internet, found out that Trinity College, Dublin, had a theater master's, and at the time I had been directing and writing for theater and stuff like that, and I figured, well, I'll just do this. So for a couple of years, it'll be grand. I'll just go over, I'll use my passport. It won't been a total waste of time. I'll get to live in a foreign country that speaks English, which is awesome. Fantastic. Yeah, because I tried living in Paris, and I just didn't care enough I just wasn't good at French. I just wasn't good at it. So yeah, 21 years later, here I am. Oh. Absolutely still loving it like it's the first day I came.
Oh, and good on you for following your heart. It's like you followed your heart or your intuition on so many of the adventures that you've had in your life. Ireland, horses, telling the truth in your wonderful book. I mean, and a lot of people will ignore that intuition or that little voice inside of them, and you've completely embraced it. That is so powerful.
Oh, thanks very much for that. Yeah, I think it's really, I think that's a huge part of the healing process in general, too, for people, to be able to begin to trust those instincts, and to just, I kind of like being afraid, which is weird, but also probably what made me a horse person. I don't mind it. Like, I know exactly how much anxiety I can cope with that spurs me into action. So, yeah, I think all the stuff that I've done has been kind of chasing that vibe a little bit, for better or worse.
Oh, and awesome. And I think that's stepping right into where life wants you to go. I have a little note on my office wall that says action reduces anxiety, or gets rid of anxiety, or something like that. Like, when the anxiety is there, it means you're supposed to be doing something with it, like, and it's there to push you forward, and you embrace that. And I think that's awesome.
God, thanks. That's a great quote too. I like that.
Yeah, I'll send it to you after our interview, and I'll put it in the
Cool.
show notes so everybody can remember it.
Yeah.
This is another cool thing about your memoir. Very often, your relationship with a particular horse paralleled the path of your human relationships, and so. And we talked a little bit about this a little bit earlier, but I'm interested in your personal experience with this. Like, how did horses help you identify areas in you that you thought needed self-improvement? And that's really captures the heart of your memoir. That's a big part of the heart of your memoir. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I didn't even know that was happening, but it goes back to that biofeedback thing. Horses are only going to give back what you give out to them. So there was one horse in particular called Maverick, who was handsome and really good at his job, and everybody wanted to get him in the lesson. And then I got him, and the first 3 days was like, the first 3 lessons, like, this horse is amazing, I'm having such a good time. And that horse that horse was so canny. He spent those first 3 lessons figuring out exactly every single thing that I was bad at, and just killing me over it for like the next 3 years. Like everything, every single thing. He knew exactly when my foot had slipped a little, the ball of my foot slipped a little off on the stirrup, and would just drop his shoulder, and I'd go out the front door. It was incredible, because that to me was like, well, who's in charge here? Am I in charge of my own safety, or am I trying to get this horse to keep me safe? Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and I realized that in a lot of my romantic relationships, that was pretty much what would happen. I would just be like, okay, you're in charge. You're in charge of keeping me happy and safe and, basically in the saddle. And then, I'm just going to, I don't know, sit back and hope for the best. So I really learned a lot from that particular horse.
That is great insights. And again, looking at what's in front of you and that is so special, because you're noticing it, and you took it on, and you learned and you grew from those experiences. That being said, is there a message in your memoir you really hope readers will take with them?
I think the main thing is that I would love for everybody to have something that they love as much as I love horse riding. And it doesn't have to be horse riding. It can be cooking or knitting or anything, painting, dancing, do something, do the thing. And I mean, obviously, again, as we said, this wasn't a childhood thing for me at all, but I'm sure that people have something in the past that they have not allowed themselves to do. And I would really exhort them and wish them with all my heart that they would do something just for themselves, because I'm such a better person for having done that for myself, and for having committed to this process, and for showing up at least twice a week, every week for 14 years. I can't tell you how that's helped me. It's taught me to trust myself, that I can count on myself and rely on myself to do what's good for me. God, I wish everybody could have that. I really do. It was hard won, and it's worthwhile.
That's beautiful and great advice. So, follow your passion, follow that thing that's calling you forward, because that happiness can lie there, right? Just like you discovered.
Yeah.
And here's another thing I wanted to ask you also. What advice would you offer to other people who may be struggling with their own codependent relationships? What would you say to them?
I think I'll just reiterate what I said before, is that it thrives in isolation. It makes you want to just put your head under the covers, and it makes you feel like you're the only person in the world that this has ever happened to. And there's a buzz out of that. There's a buzz. Come on. I mean, there is. There's a tiny little buzz about the martyr thing where it's like, I'm doing all of this and, you know, it's all out of love and blah, blah, blah. And it's kind of not so much, because the first person who's not getting any love at all is yourself. I would really recommend 12-step. And I never would have thought I'd be the person who'd be like, go to 12-step. But it helped me so much. Because there's this phrase in Al-Anon that gets bandied about quite a bit, terminal uniqueness. And I was suffering from that in a really, really large way. To be able to go in and hear other people's experiences and to identify with it and to hear what resonates. And then to also begin to understand and accept what doesn't resonate allows you to start building your own value system, and it's spectacular. I would really wish people down that path 100%.
And that's a great recommendation. I'll make sure to include links to where people can learn more about the 12-step program and Al-Anon in your show notes for people who are interested. This is an important thing to talk about. So moving a little bit more into the marketing and writing aspect of your journey with Many Brave Fools. Actually, I had one more question about Many Brave Fools, or one question directly about the book. The title is based on something really interesting, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to share a little bit about this. I thought this was really cool when I discovered this. Can you tell us a little bit about the title of the book and what's so special about it?
Yeah. Well, one of the first things I noticed when I started writing was that there were these crazy letters on the wall that weren't like alphabetical or anything. Nobody said what they meant. And, you know, they shout at you. The instructor would say, you know, change the rein from M to K or whatever. And I'd be like, well, okay, I guess that's what they're for. Y, M, Y, K. This is ridiculous. And finally, as I, you know, started actually talking to my instructors as people and not being so in awe of them, I was like, why are these crazy letters on the wall? And one of them gave me the mnemonic to remember them. And she said they were used in dressage, which I hadn't gone near at that stage. And I was like, okay, I can look that up later. And she's like, and you can remember them by saying all King Edward's horses carry many brave fools, because that's how the letters go around in the oval. And I was like, this is the most useless thing I've ever heard. I'm like, this is information. This is pointless. And then of course we got our first dressage test in a lesson. I was like, oh, okay. All right. This makes sense. And still every single time, like the way that I'll practice a test is I'll draw it on a piece of paper and I have to say all King Edward's horses carry many brave fools when I'm drawing the letters around, because I just can't remember it any other way. And then I was trying to think of a title, and this was just another gift. Like it really was. It just suited what I wanted to say so perfectly. Going back to that terminal uniqueness, the many part brings in all the people who have had all kinds of experiences with substances, you know, the abuse in the loved one, or even, you know, in their own life. The bravery it took for me to leave the situation, because it was really hard. And the bravery of getting up on a horse, and also, and the fool's part is just like, again, that crazy thing that I do where I'm just kind of like, I'm going to move to Ireland, I'm going to get on a horse, you know. So it all came together really well.
It did. It really did. And I just thought that was so interesting where the title came from and how perfectly it fits the book.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
And so I wanted to, like I said before, I wanted to move on a little bit to, you know, the writing and marketing side of your adventure as a published author. You're published by Trafalgar Square Books, which is a cool publisher. They do horse books, which is awesome. I think they're like one of the very few traditional publishers out there that just handle horse books, which I love.
Yeah.
How did you end up deciding to go the traditional publishing route? And, you know, I'd love to learn a little bit more about what it's been working with Trafalgar Square Books. I'm sure a lot of people listening to this would like to know that as well.
Sure. Yeah. I really wanted an agent. I wanted an agent to take this book and, you know, bring it somewhere big and safe. I had been working on, at the same time, some fiction that I thought I might end up self-publishing. And so I was looking into all that, and I was like, well, you know, with my background in graphic design, it's not a problem. None of this is a problem. I know how to manage a project because I've directed I've directed films and theater back in New York. Like, I know how to carry this through. The part that I just need to take a class in or something is like the whole marketing thing just wrecked my head. I really, really didn't want to have to do it. So I kept looking for an agent, and I get about maybe like one request a year in all the time that I was looking. And either didn't hear back, or it was, you know, they wanted it rewritten or something. And I was just like, no, I know that what I'm doing is what I want it to be. So I'm just going to keep plugging away. I got an edit, which helped me immeasurably. And that's a huge piece of advice I'd like to send out to people who are thinking, especially of writing something personal, is to get an editor into the process sooner rather than later, because it really helped me so much. There were so many things that were going on in the book that I didn't realize needed clarification. So there was that. And then finally I got probably the best rejection ever in my life from somebody in an agency who was like, I really loved reading your book, but you're not a celebrity. No one's going to take it. And I was like, okay.
That's interesting. Thanks. Feedback.
Wasn't quite as harsh as that, but you know, that's the takeaway.
Wow.
And I was like, all right, let's do something else. And I didn't want to self-publish it because okay, so this is good. Like, writing it wasn't hard and talking about it is fine, but the notion of having to market this by myself when it was so personal and so truthful just made me want to crawl under the desk. You know, there was no way that I was going to be able to have the distance from it to be able to do that. So I was like, all right. Someone had sent me information about Trafalgar Square books years ago, and I was just like, I'll put this on the back burner. I don't want to go directly to a publisher at this stage. And then when I got that email about not being a celebrity, I was like, oh geez, all right, well, I'll just look out what their submission is and I'll just send it in. Because I figured, and then I figured if they don't take it, then I'll just publish it myself. Because I wasn't going to go chasing publishers at this stage. And as you say, they were so, you know, they're so horse focused. I was like, well, this is my best shot at getting this published conventionally. They wanted the proposal, which was great because I had done that. I had put all the work into that, and the manuscript was complete, and it had gone through an edit, and I had changed the edits and, you know, cleaned it up. And I was like, this is as good as it's going to get at this stage, just being me. And I sent it in, fully expecting, you know, the usual kind of radio silence. And I think like within an hour, I got an email thanking me for submitting. And I was like, whoa, okay, this doesn't happen. That's not the way that this works, man. You can dial that right down. No. I'm a little scared. It was so polite. And I was just like, nobody's polite. This is crazy. And then 6 weeks later, they said they wanted it. I mean, it was that fast. It was kind of, it was totally unexpected, and fantastic, because it's been nothing but a pleasure to work with them. It's been so great.
That is awesome. And, you know, I've heard the same. I've heard that people just absolutely love working with them. And I think right now, mostly, you know, for the fiction authors the fiction horse book authors that are listening, I think right now, mostly that they handle nonfiction horse books. They do a lot of training and memoirs, and I've heard they might be dabbling into fiction, but traditionally they're not nonfiction Trafalgar Square books. Is that correct?
Yeah. And, you know, me being a genius, I was like, well, I'll just send it in. It was like, I can't believe I sent this in, because these are like all famous people. this is all like, Charlotte Dujardin, and what have I done? Like, nope.
Well, that's interesting that you mentioned that, because self-doubt as an author, as a writer, and even as a horsewoman is so always running in the background. And doing it anyway, even though you're afraid, feel the fear and do it anyway, is just you just gotta feel it and go, right? And which is what you did. And it's funny, like you did it, and then afterwards you had the fear.
It's just like,
it's another example of like the universe just kind of opened up and you were like, here, and then it worked, right?
Yeah, but also too, like you said, it was mostly great trainers writing amazing books about, with exercises and stuff, and I'm like, oh God, this book is, I don't even know where this fits, but it was exactly what they wanted, so it was great, worked out great.
Oh, see, it was meant to be. And,
Yeah.
And then, so that's really interesting that you mentioned you wanted to go this route because you were afraid of marketing it yourself, given that it was such a personal story. So I've seen the press kit they put together for you. And there's also a YouTube book trailer, which I'll link to in the show notes, but they did a beautiful job putting together your press kit. Absolutely gorgeous. How did they help you with the marketing that made you comfortable with putting your personal memoir out into the world? What are some of the things that they did to help you out?
They just did all the emailing, really, and approaching, like, because I work in media here, I got a lot of press because all my friends work on magazines. So that was great. And I work in magazines as well, so I was able to kind of go, hey, I've got this book coming out. But they were, they just had all the contacts, which was excellent, in the States, which I wouldn't have. And like you said, that press kit, no one's ever done that for me, ever, on anything that I've done. And it was like, it's just so good. They did such a great job. The attention to detail and the obvious care that they took putting it together is something that I'll always treasure. So and I had to answer stuff and, like a Q&A and talk personally. And it was easier because there was, again, that distance, and they were taking care of it. It was their responsibility to bring it to people's attention. So I didn't have to do that myself.
But you still do a lot of marketing yourself on social media. I see that you're very active on social media and sharing your story and things about the books too. So you would, they did like the heavy lifting, but you still talk about stuff and do some marketing yourself. Is that right?
Yeah, I guess I'm pretending it's not marketing. So
it's just your life, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just Instagram. Okay. I don't know. I love Instagram. It's my favorite one. It's so good.
Fun. I like it too. And I'll make sure to link to all your social media channels and particularly Instagram so people can find you. Talk to us a little bit about why you love Instagram. I'd love to hear, is this your favorite author tool?
It is, absolutely, yeah, because I love the word and picture combination, because I'm a visual person and a verbal person, so it's great to have both of them in the same place. And I just feel like, for me, it's more impactful just to have an image that, especially stories, like I resisted stories for a long time, but they're fun. I can just do some goofy stuff on stories. And it fills up your whole screen, and it looks really graphic. And it just, I just enjoy it myself as a user. So it's really fun for me to use it as an author.
Yeah. And tell us how you use the Instagram stories feature a little differently than like your main Instagram feed. So Instagram stories are things that you share like a moment of time in your life, and they disappear within 24 hours for those of you that may not know. I usually use Instagram stories to tell about events that I'm at in the moment, right? Because it's like a sort of an in the moment sort of thing. And then I'll do like recaps later that actually make it to my main feed. How do you use Instagram stories differently than your main feed?
Well, in my main feed, often, and I haven't done this in a while, so this is a good reminder, I'll publish an excerpt from the book with the book cover, with a, an applicable photo. The stories are more sort of like on the hoof, no pun intended. I'm really into storying about the weather. I do my weather every Saturday before my Saturday lesson. And then before my Wednesday lesson, I recount how dark it's gotten because the clocks have changed. So it's just that kind of stuff. It was given one of the horses ride a treat. And of course, he went for my fingers, and underneath, while it's happening, and say, yes, I know I wasn't supposed to stick my fingers in his mouth, that kind of thing. So it's a real, it can be funny. And like you say, it's definitely in the moment. We have these apples here called Pink Lady apples, and they come with stickers on them. And there's a whole thing that I do purely for my own amusement, I'm sure, but like the stickers turn up everywhere, and I see them everywhere, like on the pavement, like 7 feet of pavement, and there's a sticker, and I see it, I see the apple sticker, so I take a picture of it and I put it on stories.
That's fun. You are so fun. You are so fun and funny. I adore you. I'm just like having so much fun talking to you. Your Pink Lady apple sticker pictures that's hilarious. I love that.
And then I got a press pass to the Dublin Horse Show. And this was perfect for stories, because I got an email on the day I was going in, and they were like, before the big Longines Grand Prix event, the press were going to be let walk around the course with the course builder. And all the kids in the yard the next day were like, what?
That's so cool.
I saw you on the field. Oh my God, I saw you on the course. And I was like, yeah, I storied that. It was great. Like live, video and stuff. It was fun. Oh my gosh.
I'm sure. And then how did you get a press pass? How did that end up working? I mean, you mentioned you work for magazines. Were you covering those stories?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I was doing the Instagram thing, which I kind of got away with as being enough to justify it, basically.
And you also were like, I'm an author, and you waved your book a little bit, right?
Yeah. My book was in the horse show, which was just like the pinnacle of my life to this stage, really, because the first time I went to the horse show, I'd only been riding maybe about 8 months, and I literally thought I died and gone to heaven, because it's a 5-day event, and it used to be sort of like the only place where, before the internet and before you could buy stuff, where people could go and shop and bring their horses and show their horses, and like a really big event in the center of Dublin. So I walked in not really knowing anything about it, except that everybody up at the yard was like, we're going to the horse show. And I actually had palpitations. I had to sit down after like 15 minutes, because I was like, I can't cope with this, So to have my book in it at the bookseller who goes annually was just such a thrill. It was so great.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, those are the moments as an author that just like are so thrilling, and you're like, oh my gosh, like I wrote that, and it's right here being sold at this huge horsey event, and it's just awesome. It's an awesome feeling, and congratulations. Like,
oh, thanks.
So great.
I emailed the guys before I got there. I was like, hi, I'm the author, and they just shut me down. They were like, just come sign the book. you can't sit here all day. And I'm like, come on.
Yeah, but that's so did you know your book was going to be there, or was it just a surprise?
No, I knew it was going to be there, because we have Trafalgar Square Books has a co-publisher in England, and the people who do all the book fairs, they do the circuit, are based somewhere in the English countryside. So yeah, they let me know that it was going to be there, and I emailed them and said I was going to be around. So it worked out great. So
you didn't have an official signing. You were just available, and you could sign the books if people.
Yeah, no, they gave me all the books I had and said, just sign them right now. So I spent, like, every time I went in, there was this vendor across, and I have pictures of me like lurking between the polo shirts.
That's so awesome. Every time I sign a book, I get nervous that I'm going to like misspell something, or I never know what to like write. Like I've kind of come up with like a couple like cute little, phrases relating to the book, and then I sign my name and I put the year at the bottom. Like what do you sign? What do you do when you sign books? Do you just write your name, or do you write like a thing?
Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. It's so hard. Like it's the best thing in life.
Oh yeah.
Literally, to sign your book. And the worst thing, because you're supposed to be good with words, and now you can't do words.
Right.
It's so bad. When it's friends, it's easy, like signing books for my horse friends is easy. When I got there at the horse show, I just wrote heels down and signed my name.
Oh, that's cute. I like that.
Yeah. And something else, elbows in, I think. Yeah. On a couple of them. And one of my friends who I didn't meet there had bought one that had heels down in it. So we were laughing about that. But I find it difficult. I like the notion of writing the year in it, though. I think that's good.
Well,
that's a really good idea.
I heard people really like that, like to know, when they got the book or when it was signed. And then I think, like my books are ever going to be, worth like a lot or something. But I also heard that if you actually put the date on there, it makes them more valuable if they ever
really
wind up. Yeah, I'm not sure why that is, but I'm so happy to hear that somebody else has that same experience, because I'm always like, oh, what am I supposed to write here?
It's so bad. It's so bad. Somebody now going on that, just in terms of, when our books are worth tons of money in the year 3000 or whatever.
I love that. Yeah. They will be. I usually believe in ourselves.
No good.
I know. We're not believing in ourselves right now. Shame on us, right?
It's going to be amazing. Somebody told me that just signing your name is the best thing to do in terms of its worth in that regard, which seems a bit lame.
Totally. And my hope is that the people that I personalize the books for, it will remain on their bookshelves. Like, that's what I would really like, so
yeah,
who knows, but yeah, it's just a really interesting experience, because it's like to be signing something that you wrote, but then be like, I just don't know what to say here. So
it's just like, I don't know. I think that's what hell is like, that's going to be like an eternity of just standing there with the book and the pen going,
Well, at least in hell, we'll have something we have written. I mean, at least that's kind of a bonus.
And a pen, so we can keep writing.
Yeah, we can write on our arms. I mean, probably write anywhere else than actually being able to sign our own books. That's so funny.
Exactly. That'd be part of it, for sure.
I have so enjoyed this interview. This is so fun. I love giggling with you. You're so fantastic. We're getting a little bit towards the end of the questions. So I have 2 questions for you. And I'm really curious about this. Well, actually, I have 3 questions for you. One would be, what for you has been the hardest thing about being an author? We just talked about the challenge of signing our own names in books. What else for you has been difficult?
I think the balance between, the energy it takes to sort of keep income coming in from not books and working day jobs and things like that. I'm really fortunate in that I work steadily and that I can, choose to take days off as I need them. But the dream is to just, God, I don't know, wake up in the morning, go ride a horse, sit up the yard with my laptop, do something else with the horse, go home,
Oh, yes.
And not have to worry about the rent. I don't know. So that's kind of a drag, I think, in terms of being an author, is not being able to really be 100% full time, because it's just not possible at this stage.
Yeah, it's almost like you have 2 jobs, because authors, you have to find the time to write your books, and then there's all the other components. But really, when we sell a book, we make maybe $1 a book. So wow. It takes a whole lot of books to reach like Harry Potter level. We can write and ride all day, which is, I think, the dream for a lot of us. So
yeah.
On the flip side of that, what is the very best part of you being an author?
Just having the facility and the time, as to be able to even carve out whatever time to be able to focus on a project and to bring it to fruition and to see it all the way through, much less get it published, which at this stage, and even with all the self-publishing, seems like a really cherry on the top kind of situation, so many people, it goes down to like, well, I'm going to write a book. I have an idea for a book. Are you going to write the book? Somebody writes the book. The process of people's perceptions of how it works, to just be able to carry it through and have it actually be a thing in the world is amazing. And I just love the idea part. I love the part where it's like, I've done all the groundwork and I've done all the notes and I've gone through the draft. And when you get that momentum where all you want to do is wake up in the morning and sit down and you go through the whole day and then you fall into bed and you wake up and do it all over again, whatever that time frame is, it could be 2 weeks, it could be a month, you know, it's just the best thing ever. When I feel like I've got it, I'm driving it and I know where it's going, it's almost done, no one can take this away from me, it's amazing. It's so amazing.
Yes, I love that. Yes, that's so right on. I love it. That flow feeling, that feeling like where, you know, you just cannot wait to get there and like sit down at the table and it just like magically starts happening, right? Like that is the best. Totally.
It's so great. And nobody else understands. I mean, it sounds, you know, people write about this all the time and, you know, I write fiction as well. And there are things that the characters do that I didn't know they were going to do.
Absolutely. And totally. Yeah. It's like they're coming from, they're like,
I'm like, what?
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
It's so great.
Oh,
it's so great.
I love that. Yeah, it's like I was just talking with another author, Candace Carabas. She writes the Dream Horse mystery series, and she has this experience too, where her character, like we were talking about how the characters, like when you write fiction, you know, like kind of they're alive, and they're just like, you are the medium that's delivering whatever the heck that they want to do out there, and and they surprise you and you're like, that's not what I thought was going to happen, but okay, let's follow that. It's so cool to hear that you have that experience too.
Well, I was the last round of proofs on Many Brave Fools. Here's another thing that's really important, and you probably already know this, but you have to read it out loud.
Oh yes, ma'am.
Read it out loud, man. Oh boy.
Talk about that a little.
Oh, I'm telling you something. I've never done that. And I was like this was like the third round with Many Brave Fools, and it was getting to crunch time, and this was the last chance, and it was PDF. And I was like, I can't read this again. I can't read this again. So I was like, well, I'll read it out loud. And I know I've come across this advice and ignored it. Don't ignore this advice. Unbelievable. What a difference it made. It made such a difference. And so I'm highlighting all these changes. I'm like, please don't kill me. Please don't kill me. You have to fix this because I only just read this out loud right now, you know? So I'm sitting there, and one of the main themes in the book is riding 20-meter circles, because I just didn't understand, like the crazy letters on the wall. I was like, why do we keep doing this? This is like the same thing every single time. And I knew I was getting better when I realized how important it was, you know? So I'm sitting, you know, it's a huge thing in the book, 20-meter circle, whatever. And I'm reading it out loud, and I'm getting to a part about, you know, being in a 12-step meeting, and I read out loud to myself. It's like, and we all sat in a circle. I was like, oh my God, that's a circle too. And I was like, dude, did you just realize this? It's like, you wrote this thing. You didn't even know you were doing that? Oh my God.
So you discovered a link, you know, after you read it out loud to yourself. Yeah.
After, like 2 seconds before it was going to be published, I was like, oh, that was really smart. That's
like, and also great advice, right? Like, so you finally figured out the value of people telling you to do that. Yeah.
Oh boy.
It makes a difference, because things read aloud seems so much different than when you're just reading it on the paper. And like when you read it on the paper, like, you know, so read it out loud, print it out. Don't just read it on your laptop, because you see different things in that too. So it's like there's also, and then read it out loud, but then I also have someone read it to me.
Oh my God.
So I can hear how it sounds, and then I'm like, ugh, that sounds weird, or it doesn't make sense. Or I notice something like what you just said. There's a connector that I missed just by myself. Yeah. So
that's really brave, like having somebody read it to you.
Well,
I don't think
I use my hubby, you know, so like we have like a little system. Like I'll write all week long, and then on the weekends we'll have coffee, and I'll have him read whatever I wrote back to me. Usually it's like a chapter or two, and I have them read it back to me. and then he catches my first errors, and then he kind of gives me insight. He's like, this, but, and like, or I really like this, and go, I like it when you do this, go this route. So he's like my early feedback, so I can make kind of adjustments as I'm writing. It's kind of a neat.
That's brilliant.
Little thing.
Very handy.
So last question for you, and then we'll talk about where people can find you in your books. But I'm wondering, I mean, you mentioned you also write fiction. What are you curious about right now? What's next? What are you thinking about for the future?
Well, I have, my first 3 novels were contemporary romantic comedies. All of them had Irish interest, and I only started writing books when I moved here. So that had a lot to do with it, I guess. It was important to me to have my experience here articulated somehow. And then, I just wasn't feeling it anymore. So now I'm working on a new romance series, sort of Regency era historical, so Jane Austen-y vibe.
Cool.
Plus shapeshifters. So that's what I'm doing right now. Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah, no, it's been really, really fun to write. It's been really fun to write.
Oh, that sounds awesome. And so when might those books, are they going to have horses in them? And when might people be able to find those horses or those books?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. It's still kind of up in the air how it's going to work out. I do have literary representation now, which was fantastic. So the first 3 are going to be kind of apex predator lead alpha males, and salty, ambitious for their time heroines. They're fab.
I love it. That's exciting.
Yeah. But there's horses all over it, obviously. There's one horse, I don't know if she's going to make it into the first series, that I named after Delilah, who was the second horse I ever rode and was like the merriest mare who ever mared. And she's like that in the book, and it's so fun for me.
Well, that's so awesome. Like, when this series, do you have a title for the series yet, or is it still kind of?
No, I don't think I can talk about it yet. So
okay, which is fine. Yeah. Let's have you come back on the show when this series is available, and we can talk about what your adventures with this one has been like.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I so love talking with you. You crack me up. You're so funny and so powerful and so wise and so brave for sharing your story of codependency and Many Brave Fools. Where can listeners find you and your books, Susan?
Well, I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Many Brave Fools. Both of those have the same handle. And I'm on Facebook, Susan E. Conley, author. And my blog is manybravefools.com. So that's the best. Those are the best ways.
Great.
To find in the ether.
And then are your links to your books available there too? And where can people find Many Brave Fools?
Oh yeah. The links are definitely on the website, manybravefools.com. You can buy it directly from Trafalgar Square Books as well, which I'd highly recommend, just because small publishers aren't really getting much of a presence in bookshops these days. So to order directly from them would be spectacular. Or just, go into your local independently run bookshop and ask them to order it, and they'll get it in a heartbeat, really, at this stage in life, in our world.
Awesome advice. Yes, let's support local authors, local bookstores, small publishers, particularly equestrian small publishers, because we love them. And thank you. That's also really great advice. I will put the link to all of your wonderful places where people can find you in the show notes. And I will also link to your book through Trafalgar Square Books, so people can purchase it there. And Susan, I have so enjoyed having you. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Carly, thanks so much. And I just have to say that, I am honored to be here, because I know exactly how much work goes into doing these kind of things. And you're so generous with your time and with your support for other authors. I really admire that. And I'm so grateful that you had me on your show.
Oh, thank you so much for saying that. It does take quite a bit of work, but what's so important to me is building this community and sharing about horse books. And we all write so many different things in there. And I want to make sure horse lovers and others can find our books and start talking about that, and, you know, supporting each other. And Authors Unite is like what I stand behind. So thank you for being part of that and coming on the show today. It's been so much fun.
Absolute pleasure.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast. I hope you enjoy these Q&A sessions with wonderful equine authors who love all things horses and riding, just like me. Visit my website, carlykadecreative.com, where you can read the show notes, and make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you so much for your support. Want a free guide to secrets of horsebook authors? Gallop over to carlykadecreative.com/wisdom to have author advice delivered instantly to your inbox. If you are an author who writes about horses and would like to be spotlighted, please let me know. Visit my contact page at carlykadecreative.com to fill out a request. I'd be happy to have you on the show too. Thank you for tuning in to the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast. See you next time. I'm your host, Carly Kade. Creative writing makes my spurs jingle.